Welcome to Control Schedule process under Project Schedule Management. The Control Schedule process is the last process under Project Schedule Management, and it is placed in the Monitoring and Controlling Process group. The Control Schedule process is all about controlling, monitoring, and managing the schedule baseline in order to achieve the project planned completion date. So it involves tight controlling and monitoring whether your project is over the schedule or going out of the control, and taking preventive and corrective actions to bring the project schedule back on track. As explained in other processes, the control schedule process also is based on certain inputs, tools and techniques, and also there will be an output for this process. Control schedule process involves you as a project manager. Firstly, you should understand the current status of the project schedule and where it is now as per the project schedule. And you will have to understand the current factors influencing to create schedule changes. You will, as a project manager, you need to understand what are the factors that is influencing your project schedule to make changes. The factors that influence your project schedule to go overrun of your project schedule. And also, you need to consider the necessary schedule reserves and whether you're within your reserves, the contingency reserves of your schedule. And as a project manager, you will have to determine if the project schedule has changed and whether you have to change your project schedule, and then managing actual changes as they occur. In the context of agile approach, it involves determining you as the project manager to determine the current status of the project schedule and conducting retrospectives, which involves the review of the schedule reviews and also to understanding of the project backlogs after each iteration cycle. After each iteration cycle, reprioritizing the remaining work plan, reprioritizing the remaining backlog of the work, and determining the rate at which the deliverables need to be produced, validated, accepted in a given time per iteration. So you will have to understand as a project manager how quickly you need to deliver the balanced backlog of work, and determining if the project schedule has changed and managing the changes as they occur through the managed control process. So as an input to this schedule, the schedule management plan, which provides the guidelines, procedures, policies regarding how you manage the schedule of your project, will be in importance, because it will provide the tolerance limits, it will provide the control limits and the escalation paths and other process and guidelines that you need to adhere during this project. Also, the project schedule baseline, which we just completed, and the scope baseline, which we have completed earlier, would be an input for this process, because you will be measuring the variance of the current performance of your schedule against these baselines. For example, if a project is delayed, in order to calculate the variance of how much the project has been delayed, you need to compare the current performance against the schedule baseline. So therefore, the schedule baseline and the scope baseline and the schedule management plan would be definite important inputs for this process. Also, you might have to refer to lessons learned register, the project calendars, the project schedule, and the resource calendars in order to control the project schedule. and take any corrective and preventive actions. For example, you might have to access the resource calendar to see whether to take any corrective actions. For example, and corrective action could be increasing the number of resources into your project. So you need to understand whether your resources are free or not. So resource calendars will be in importance. Work performance information is important because you need data to carry out this task, and you need to understand the percentage of completion of your project, what is the status of activities, what is the percentage status of each activity, in order to control the schedule. And any process and guidelines relating to schedule controlling in your organization, any monitoring and reporting methods, escalation paths would be through the organization process assets. Some of the tools that can be used in control schedule will be the earned value analysis. We will learn earned value analysis in detail in cost control process in one of our future videos. But through the earned value analysis, you'll be able to understand the schedule variance, the value of the schedule variance in monetary terms, and the schedule performance index, which will be used in order to extrapolate and see what is the expected timelines in the future. The performance review includes measuring, comparing, and analyzing the schedule performance against the schedule baseline. So you need to assess the current status of your project, the current status of your schedule achievement against the schedule baseline. Trend analysis could be used to examine and determine the overtime to determine whether the performance is improving or deteriorating. So through a trend analysis, you should be able to determine what is expected from the project schedule, whether it's going off track the original time plan or whether it will be improving the time plan. Variance analysis will be used, which will look into the planned actions as versus the actual actions, decide whether corrective and preventive actions to be taken. You could also use what if scenarios and see, and by changing certain parameters of your project, and see whether you could improve your schedule timeline or whether it will deteriorate your schedule timeline. So you could use certain what if scenarios and see whether how it impacts your project schedule. One of the other tools that commonly used is the iteration breakdown chart. This can be used as a general breakdown chart for predictive model and an iterative breakdown chart from the agile method. So here, after each iteration, for example, you can find out the backlog of work to be done, the remaining work to be done, and at the inception you can plan after n number of iterative cycles the remaining work to get reduced in this manner. And when the project is on and while the project's work performance is done, you as a project manager can keep a track of the actual work completed and keep a track of how long the remaining work will take. So if you plot up the balance part of the work on the graph, you can extrapolate and see where you will end up in the project timeline, and to see whether there is a variation between the planned time plan and the projected time plan. So iterative burn down chart can be used as a forecast trend line to predict the variance. Outputs of the control schedule would be definitely the work's performance information. It will generate, as in other control process, same here in control schedule process, it will generate many work performance information. It will produce information of how much of work has been completed and how much a degree of variation is there, the schedule variation, the schedule performance index values. So all this information will be handy in generating management information reports to your higher management or the project or the PMO office. Schedule forecast is another expected output from control schedule, where you forecast your schedule so that whether you can see whether it deviates from the original project schedule. Change request would be an output, because any corrective and preventive actions that you take would result in a change request. For example, if you are out of schedule of your project and maybe with the customer's agreement, you try to phase out your project so that you try to achieve your original project timelines. In such a way, your scope baseline must change slightly, and you will have to adjust your scope baseline so that your schedule baseline to be taken back on track to the original schedule baseline. In whatever instances, any change request or any changes to your scope or schedule or the cost baseline needs to go through the integrated change management process. The project management document updates, again, the control schedule will definitely provide updates to the schedule baseline, which is corrective and preventive actioning, the schedule management plan on the process and the procedures, and obviously to the cost baseline. Thank you. Also, it will provide document updates for the schedule data and to the risk register. And also, organization process assets will be updated, and you will document the corrective actions that has been chosen and the reason for choosing the corrective action, causes for variations, and you will update the lesson learned register with your control actions. Thank you.